Welcome everybody, hope you're doing well. It's a very special day here in the train room because we have the very first two units ever painted in the brand new CPKC merger scheme. These are the ES44ACs from ScaleTrains, CP9375 and KCS4805. These were the first prototypes to feature this new CPKC paint scheme and the first models to deliver in the HO scale world in this new CPKC paint scheme. Before we get into the unboxing, do me a favor and subscribe if you're new or if you find yourself coming back anyways. Really appreciate it. Helps me to make a couple dollars, so thank you so much. Like the video if you enjoyed as well, and drop me a comment if you found these exciting or if you managed to pick one of these up yourself. But let's go ahead and get started. I've decided that we'll be unboxing number 9375, the XCP unit, which in real life was the first unit to feature this scheme and debuted in that very gorgeous photo shoot. Here's a look at the side of the box that you've already seen, and this amazing artwork, which is exclusive to the ScaleTrains CPKC units. There's the other side, same thing over here. And on the back, we've got the full list of features, which are specific to the CP unit and the KCS unit, respectively. ScaleTrains debuted new box artwork with the CSX heritage units. So it's pretty cool to see them bring these to the CPKC units as well. Here's our product manual, and here's a shot of the DCC and sound functions, just for reference. Of course, we'll take a look at this once again when we do the demo section. Pretty standard packaging, nice foam, and the clamshell. We've got a little baggie with roller bearing caps. Mine only has one in it because I actually had to replace one already because one was missing in this unit. We have some nice plastic on the top, and sometimes the truck immobilizers come with the locomotive. You just pop those off. Be very careful on this foam, of course. And here is a quick full 360 after we got that handrail foam off. This is my first Canadian Pacific or Kansas City Southern unit. And I was able to pick it up from Yankee Dabbler for $305. That's the new price for ScaleTrains ES44s, which was announced before all of the tariff situation came through. So that was an expected increase. But let's go ahead and take a look at the details on this unit. We'll of course do a quick side-by-side of this unit and the XKCS unit to compare some of the differences because there are some road number specific details in this run. So starting at the front of 9375, the XCP unit, we'll go top down as usual. All of the lighting is LEDs on this model. So lit number boards, we have a nose-mounted headlight and ditch lights on the front and rear on the CP unit. There is a black grade crossing camera on the engineer's side. It's very hard to see on camera. I had to really look in person to find it because the cab is quite dark as the side windows are tinted. We've got nice white grab irons above the windows and on the nose with some nice red windshield wipers, also separately applied metal pieces. On the door, there's a little label that says tools just above the window, which I thought was my favorite detail, and I saw it was very noticeable on the photo shoot shots of this unit, and I'm really glad that ScaleTrains really nailed that. Looks great, as well as this sort of caution striping, the red and white striping going vertically next to this grab iron. All of the handrails are plastic on this model, and they were mostly in good shape, little bit of warpage, but nothing too crazy. The center is silver, actually, across the red stanchions on the side with a silver chain. We do have a walkway light in the middle here as well on the front and rear of each unit. We've got the ScaleTrains metal coupler down below, a couple more grab irons on the plow. We've got MU hoses on each side. You'll notice there are two sort of train line hoses at the bottom by the coupler. The one on the right is your typical train line hose, and the one on the left is an ECP brake hose, which is pretty cool. So neat little feature that ScaleTrains was able to include. But all of those have silver tipped ends. And these white loops are for the coupler cut lever, which extends all the way across the front of the unit. That's also wire with this little green cross, which I believe means there's a first aid kit on board. And here's a quick little quarter panel to try to get some of those details of the front for you. The red paint is that vibrant in real life. You just put a little bit of light on it and it reflects like crazy. So it looks really sharp. It's a very good red paint, which came from the CP lineage. All right, moving on to the front side of the locomotive. As I talked about before, tinted windows on the side, that quad window without sunshades. We've got the Mexican, American, and Canadian flags on the side here all together with the CP underneath the number on the side to designate that it's from CP instead of KCS. We've got the F for front on the side, as well as many small labels here on the side. Some of them warning labels and some just information. Very, very small printing, visible under magnification, but hard to catch on camera in decent quality. It does appear that this white line is a little bit bendy on camera. Looks like it dips down a little bit. That's just because this section right here is a raised plate. So that's just how it appears on camera. It's pretty straight in real life, so no worries there. You'll see we got two dynamic brake housings. The third one does not exist on this unit. And that the handrails are actually different colors. The actual railings themselves are black in this section with red stanchions and black on the second level here as well. But you'll see that that changes as we move down the locomotive. All right, on to the rear half of the locomotive on the conductor side. See, we got wire grab irons coming down from the inverter area. And most obviously, you'll see this paint scheme change in the rear. That's that special livery change for the CPKC units. And you'll notice that the railing stanchions turn to black in the rear as well. The railing itself remains black with red stanchions all the way towards the front, but that's where that area is. We've got the fuel gauge on this side, as well as a little label that says Spillix fuel fill only. Pretty standard ScaleTrains features on this part of the locomotive. We've got the brake chain, which is plastic, which is in two pieces. It's pretty close, but doesn't fully connect in the bottom. It's black, like the trucks and the rear half of the locomotive, so the details are a little bit hard to capture on camera, but the quality is up there with any other ScaleTrains locomotive that I own. The rear grates here are also separately applied etched metal pieces, which you can see into. It's most easily seen through up in the rear over here. We can see those weights in the back. But this nice white striping all the way through the rear with more white handrails on the back. This locomotive also has rotating bearing caps. This one in the rear is the one that was lost that I had to put in. That's why I only have one spare. And it's not exactly flush with the locomotive, so don't pay too much attention to that one. All the other ones were probably applied from the factory. I just need to touch that one up a little bit. And onto the rear of the CP locomotive. Very, very similar to the front. We got high mounted headlight as well as ditch lights here. Same thing with the ECP brake hose and train line hose with some spare knuckle couplers and standard MU hoses on each side of the ScaleTrains metal coupler. Plastic railings once again with another silver colored plastic railing in the middle. Looks pretty good, and we've got some nice cross-hatched striping here as well with the red and white in the center. And onto the rear of the engineer side for consistency's sake. Same kind of thing, moving back towards the front. Black railings and black stanchions until we get to black railing and red stanchions. You can see more of those see-through panels in the rear, as well as that nice beaver logo, the new CPKC logo, sort of a hybrid of the CP and KC logos. A little bit more inspiration from the beaver logo. You'll see the air tanks here on the side. We've got the fuel gauge on the side as well. Another Spillix fuel fill on that side of the locomotive. And I wanted to show you a little angled shot of the front of the locomotive here on the engineer side, so you can capture the nice fire extinguisher logo on the engineer's door there, which is pretty cool. You can also see into the dynamic brake housing to see the fan models behind the etched metal separately applied grates there. There's a better shot of some of the warning labels on the engine hood doors that run all the way down the side of the locomotive. Same thing as the other side with the CP lettering underneath the 9375 with the flags. Wind deflector, same as the other side, with a mirror, which is unique to this side. Up front, this is our builder's plate, which is very hard to read, even under magnification, but the effect is totally across there. Looks really good. Nice inclusion from them. And next up, just a couple shots from top down on this locomotive. See most obviously above the cab, the full PTC antenna array with some nice piping detail. This is where you can also tell that the handrails aren't perfect. This is probably the worst of the damage between the two models, that little bending there. So with enough small pressure, you should be able to fix that. The walkways are both treaded all the way down the long hood. We've got the doors here for the battery boxes on this side. If you look up front here, you'll see the steps are see-through as well, and these are slotted. They're rectangular. The KCS unit will have circles, so just wanted to point that out. That is a nice difference. The front walkway here is also treaded as well. Pretty hard to see just because it's all black. But moving over to the rear from the top down, you'll see a lot of those warning labels on top of the dynamic brake area and such. The horns, this one is painted red, and then pay attention to this style of exhaust. It's red on the outline as well. You'll see the KCS unit is a little bit different. And in the rear, you can see the nice radiator fan detail. This is probably the best or most obvious ScaleTrains locomotive to see that fan detail, just because that yellow really pops in there with the red, and the stripe sort of goes underneath the fans almost, it seems like. So a really nice detail there. You can really see that nicely. These are also separately applied metal grates for the other radiator section, which look great as well. And now on to the underside of the unit. Pretty standard ScaleTrains level of detail in terms of piping and other separately applied pieces on the underneath, primarily all plastic on the underside here. You'll see the center truck here has a rotating bearing cap and the outer ones are covered. The conductor side will have the same arrangement, and the engineer's rear will have 3 open that you'll see in a second. You can see also rust color wheels on these locomotives, fairly recent ScaleTrains edition, but always want to point that out just because it looks really nice. One less little detail for you to add later. And just moving down here, pretty flat underneath the fuel tank, just a screw there to hold that on. And here's a shot of the underside in the rear. That's where you can see right up into the weight speaker section in the back here. Pretty similar levels of piping detail on the rear as well. And that's where you can see all 3 of these axles on this side have rotating bearing caps with a pretty flat section underneath. No traction motor detail, really just a bump to fit the gears for the wheels themselves. Looks really good on this unit. Very, very happy with the print level. Let's go ahead and do some quick comparisons to the KCS number 4805. All right, here is a quick 360 of CPKC 4805, the XKCS unit. Just before we take a look at the details, just so you get a little overview if you want to take a look at a specific detail in particular. And let's compare. All right, of course, KCS unit on the right, CP unit we just took a look at on the left. A couple major things, I guess, to point out. Not a whole lot in the front. Mostly you're looking at a difference in the train line hoses. You don't have that ECP box, which is mounted on the CP unit on this side over here with extra hoses. So just the standard train line hose on the front of the 4805. The 4805 also has the same cab-mounted grade crossing camera, which is still hard to see in there. Both of these have full cab interiors. You can see it's kind of that light orange color. It looks really nice when you get the right angle, but very hard to see through the side because the windows are both tinted. But they do have full chairs and control boxes inside, which looks really good in person, just a little hard to pick up on camera. Moving over to the side of the units, you'll notice the KCS unit in front has all 3 dynamic brake openings, and you'll see that also on the other side of the unit. You can also pretty clearly tell we've got different horns, the KCS of course in silver, and different exhaust colors. They're pretty much the same exhaust. The heights seem about the same, just the KCS is also in silver in front. Other than that, besides the KCS logo and the inclusion of sunshades on the cab here, Pretty similar in terms of the sides of the locomotives here. Very nice paint schemes, very crisp once again. Onto the rear, similar setup, but big difference. The CP unit on the right has those rear ditch lights, while we don't have that on the KCS unit. Same headlight orientation side by side on the rear. The reason I initially wanted just the CPKC unit for certain was because of the rear ditch lights. I think they're really cool, so I was definitely leaning towards picking up 9375, and I figured just because of the paint scheme wise, which you'll see on the track, it looks so good back to back, so I knew I had to have 4805 as well. Same thing on the rear as well with the train line hoses, missing that ECP hose on the left on the KCS unit. And on the other side of the locomotive, the engineer side, I did move the KCS unit to the front since we haven't seen that as much. Very similar in the rear on the engineer side, mostly just that horn color and horn style difference. You'll see up at the front, that's where we have that extra dynamic brake housing, extra fan, extra grate that we don't have on the CP unit. And up top, we're missing a couple warning labels on the KCS unit that we had on the CP in the rear, as well as a different antenna. This is a Sinclair antenna on the KCS unit, a little different on the CP. The main difference in terms of walkway from above is that the KCS unit has circular holes in these steps as opposed to the rectangular ones that we saw in the CP unit. But other than that, very similar in terms of paint scheme wise. We got the same labels. You'll see the same fire extinguisher logo on the rear of the engineer's door, which I think is just a cool touch. Same flag detail and KCS under the numbers in this case. But let's go ahead and move on over to the test track and show you the DCC and sound functions. Before we get into things, just wanted to show you how these locomotives look back to back on the track, sort of how they were paired up in their first revenue run. And really that's where this paint scheme shines. Nice presence on the track. That paint scheme flows perfectly into the next one, into that gorgeous CP red. Looks really sweet. Just figured I'd share that before we started. For the purposes of the demo, we'll primarily focus on 9375. We'll blow the horn of 4805 as well. That's the only difference in terms of functionality. Here's a reminder of the DCC and sound functions that we'll take a look at. The only incorrect labels that I found is number 21 and number 3, the handbrake and coupler clank, which are mapped backwards to what the manual said, which is actually the same issue I had on the second most recent run of ES44s, the Norfolk Southern Heritage units. So I'm not sure why that's happening, but hopefully that gets flipped around in the manual or in the program correctly moving forwards. The only change I've made to these locomotives was programming them to their cab number. Everything else is factory except for me turning off the analog mode on the locomotives, which I've started doing on my DCC locomotives just to protect them from accidental use on DC layouts. By default, of course, the address is set to 03. You can go ahead and change that fairly quickly. Function 8 is what will start up your locomotive. So you see that turned on a bunch of lights. You got the walkway lights, the number boards, as well as the ground lights, which I forgot to mention earlier. Function 0 turns on our directional headlight. And function 6 does our directional ditch lights. You'll hear the air compressor currently on. That cycles on and off repeatedly while we're idle here and while you're moving. Function 1 is our bell. Blow the horn on 9375 with function 2. The overall sounds of this locomotive are pretty tame, but that bell is very loud on this locomotive. Here's the bell and horn sequence on 4805. So you'll see that bell continues on for a little bit and automatically comes on when the horn is blown. F3 is labeled as our coupler clank, but is really our handbrake noise. Function 4 are our dynamic brakes, which we'll take a look at when we're moving. F5 turns on the DPU light, or class lights. We don't have class lights, so we have the DPU light. So while we're facing forwards and I press F5, that'll just turn on the rear light. We'll take a look at when we're moving backwards as well. But if I do the same thing on 4805, it's facing forwards. You can just see it out of the corner here. If I press 5, get that rear light on. Same thing with this unit. The rear light's on in this case. But I can go ahead and turn off F5, brings it back up to the front. F7 has no labeled function. F8, of course, is our startup and shutdown. F9 is the drive hold, keeps it at the same speed while you're moving, so you can ramp up and down the prime mover with your throttle instead. F10 are the independent brakes, which don't have a sound on these locomotives. Until you release them. So that was the release press of that button. F11 turns on our radiator fan. And F12 is our headlight dimmer, pretty standard stuff. It'll turn off the ditch lights and lower the front headlight. Bring that back up. F13 is the air dryer. It's a quiet on and a louder turning off button press. F14 has no function. F15 is the isolation switch, which does have a sound there when you press it and release it. So disconnecting the motor, that's what it does. F16 has no function. F17 is your auto brake set and release, which doesn't have a noise associated to that. F18 is our sanding valve. And the sanding valve goes on for a little bit. Sorry about that air compressor in the middle there. F19 is our short air let-off. That's only functions when you press the button. F20 is a manual version to turn on that air compressor that you've heard coming on and off throughout this video. F21 is labeled as the handbrake, but is actually the coupler clank. So a different function for turning on and turning off. F22 is our cab door noise. That has different functions on and off as well. F23 is our engine hood doors. Same thing, longer sequence when being turned off. F24 is your reverser center, locking the throttle controls when it's on. F25 are the cooling shutters. Only functions when turned on. And 26 and 27 is our manual notching up and down, which we'll do in just a second. 28 is the logic for that, so you can toggle that on or off. But let's go ahead and notch up to 8 and then notch on back down.
and coming back down. And back down to idle. A little bit of a delay on that notching up and down, which is also present when you're moving the locomotive. So speaking of that, let's go ahead and do so. Alrighty, moving 9375 at 1 speed step. Nice engine ramp up. Starts a little jerky for the first couple rotations of the wheels, and then it smooths out, buttery smooth, 1 speed step here. Absolutely fantastic. We'll move up to speed step 5 now. Still very smooth. It'll be smooth all the way up from this point. Let's ramp up to 10 to hear that notching up. And we'll just bring it back down here. If you turn it back down to 0, just like I did there, very quickly, it will stop very quickly. Otherwise, you can get it to coast a little bit by turning the speed down a little bit more slowly. Here's a quick look. If I press function 5 while we're still in the forward direction, you get that rear light on. But if I switch into reverse with the ditch lights on, we've got those ditch lights present. Let's go ahead and come in reverse now at speed step 5. And I'll ramp us up a bit and toggle on the dynamic brakes. So you'll hear those come on, as well as the noise when we switch from front to reverse. That's called the Johnson bar. So pretty cool sounds on this locomotive from that part. Let's go ahead and give you a quick run by with 4805 in a nice consist. I'm going to go ahead and show you the shutdown on 4805 since we featured 9375 so much. So go ahead and toggle off F8. You get a couple air let-offs over time. So if you leave it for another second, we'll get another one coming up. And this model also features capacitors in it, so you see the ditch lights and the front headlight on. Go ahead and remove it from the tracks to show you that capacitor life. And there we go. Hope you enjoyed that little demo. Couple quick technical things to point out.
All of the wheels were engaged according to my wheel gauge, so good news there. And while I don't have an official coupler height gauge, seemed pretty good when compared to all my other locomotives and rolling stock, so good news there. Overall, I'm extremely happy with these locomotives, and I'm very lucky to have been able to pick them up. Again, talking about price for a minute, these were $305, which was the pre-communicated increase from ScaleTrains from the fall when these were announced. So new price increase on the ES44s moving forwards. I picked them up from Yankee Dabbler because I couldn't find them anywhere else in stock online with DCC. So lucky to grab some of the last few in stock. So if you do happen to find some of these in stock, I definitely jump on them if you can. They've been selling extremely fast and are probably sold out at this point if I'm guessing, but good luck to you. The overall quality on these locomotives I believe is very high. The only minor issues were the plastic handrails being slightly deformed by the cab, which is pretty typical of most locomotives except for your metal handrails on rapido. Maybe we'll get that in ScaleTrains one day. Other than that, besides that missing bearing cap, which of course they provide extras, so that was nice. Not a big deal to pop that on, so no issues with that necessarily. Print quality looks great. Some very small labels, very hard to read unless you're right up close, but when you're up close, they're very legible, very crisp, well done. Good weight on these locomotives, pretty standard ScaleTrains, ES44 weight. Speakers sound good. Hopefully that demo section gave you a good idea of what these things sound like. And from what I can tell based on the photos online, these units are pretty accurate to how they appear currently in their new CPKC scheme. Of course, it's still up for debate if this paint scheme itself was the best option. I think it looks great on a model like this, running back to back. I showed you a shot of that earlier. That's where I think it's really striking with the units run like that. Haven't seen too many out in the wild running nose to tail elephant style. I think the livery is a little bit lost there, but as for the model's representation, I think it does a really good job. The red on the paint really pops. It's a very nice red. I don't have a CP unit to compare with, just the standard CP paint. From what I can tell and what I've seen online, unless you're running it with one of those Prime for Grime or weathered athearn Genesis models, this CP red paint should match up pretty nice and should fit right in with a contest of both CP or KCS units, just as it's doing today. Haven't yet seen one in the wild myself, still looking at railfan photos and videos, but looks pretty good. Maybe they'll come my way soon. But once again, very happy with these models, very glad I was able to pick them up. So I wish you the best of luck in trying to find your own if you're so interested. I would definitely recommend picking up one of these schemes. It's not often that we get a Class 1 merger in our lifetimes, especially now when the railroads have consolidated quite a bit. So I definitely recommend it if you have a chance. I think ScaleTrains did a great job with these locomotives, catching all the details. I'll go ahead and end off this review here. If you did make it this far, consider subscribing. Really appreciate it. Helps me to make a couple dollars, so thank you so much. Like the video if you enjoyed as well, and drop me a comment. Again, if you were able to snag one of these yourselves, and let me know how you're liking it, or if you have any other questions, I'll do my best to answer them as best I can. But thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.